I'd like to welcome everyone to Tara Institute this evening. It's already the fourth night of the Mondays that I've been presenting this month. So I look forward to spending some time together, introducing a few essential meditation techniques, together with some stimulating and hopefully meaningful ideas that might help support a fledgling meditation practice. So, as we have done in previous weeks, we're going to commence with a meditation. And I've already said quite a lot about this particular meditation in the previous Mondays, but for those who might not have been here before, it's a single-pointed meditation. The single-pointed refers to the fact that we're choosing to focus exclusively upon one object, and that object is the breath, the mere breath. We're not adding or subtracting anything to the simple, natural fact of the breath occurring in and out. So we ride the breath with the force of awareness or mindfulness. And from time to time we glance sideways into the frame of the meditation, into the body of the meditation, if you like, in order to assess, is the mind upon the breath? And often we'll find that it's completely out the window. And out the window means that it's left the room. It's home, worrying about the cat. It's anticipating a very difficult meeting with your boss at work tomorrow. It's a sudden pang of anxiety connected to your parent or your child. It's whatever has the strength and momentum to cut the contact with your chosen object, the breath. So in this particular technique, we're not judging or sifting the value of other objects. The mere fact that they're appearing is sufficient to regard them as distractions, and then we, on that basis, recognise they're drawing us away from the breath, and we simply return to our focus. So this process of recognising distraction and returning isn't a failure, it's actually a very, very powerful tool, a precision tool for developing more and more enhanced levels of concentration. So as we become more equipped or adept at this meditation, we'll discover that we have the ability to pick up more subtle levels of distraction, and we'll also have the capacity to cut those distractions at their root, even before they've got up and running. So we become very, very alert and very, very shrewd and subtle in our ability to pick distractions. And as well as that, one of the great outcomes of this technique is that it will become increasingly difficult for powerful distractions to arise. And the reason for that is that as our mind becomes more subtle in its focus on a single object, all of the sensory stimulations and conceptual turmoil that occupies the mind, often in a flood or a swarm of activity, naturally subsides on the spot of our single-pointed focus and dissolves away. We don't need to provide any remedy for those distractions. We simply have to maintain the focus of the breath. Now, a very common problem or tendency that can arise is that we'll find that we are indeed capable of focusing upon the breath, our chosen object, but we'll have the ability somehow to be running a kind of sub-dialogue under the surface. Has anyone had this experience? We're kind of, yes, I'm on the breath, doing pretty well. Oh yeah, I'm doing really, really well. Oh yeah, well actually it's better than the day I had yesterday because we're actually having a conversation about ourselves or something else while kind of vaguely holding our object. So it's a bit like absent-mindedly holding a leash for an animal, a dog that we're taking for a walk. And we're kind of not conscious of it. We're looking at the flowers and the trees and the birds and so forth. Yeah, we're still holding on because we don't want to lose the dog, but we're not really aware until the dog suddenly tugs at the lead and we realise we've got a dog to deal with. It's about to chase a cat and we have to become more astute in how we behave at that moment. So, in other words, the very lulling or the ability to subside the gross conceptions in the mind that will come about as a product of the meditation enables this almost careless, carefree, drifty kind of peacefulness to arise. We think, oh wow, this is all right. But in actual fact, it's an extremely superficial state of peacefulness or rest. It's possible to go much, much deeper than that. So I would have to say in general terms that Western culture, as we sort of traditionally know it, hasn't really even begun to investigate or emphasise these kinds of capacities that we might have exploring the nature of the mind and utilising it in meditation. So, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, we've gone incredibly far in the West, breaking matter down to neutrinos and beyond, but we haven't even begun to get anything like as far investigating the interiority of our subjective experience. So in other words, we haven't really utilised our intelligence and our potential as people until we've managed to swing the power of our mind reflectively inwards. So as I've noted in previous weeks, the purpose of that swinging inwards isn't to become a self-contained, smug, peaceful individual who somehow doesn't rely or isn't aware of the world around them. It's in fact the opposite, to become more acute, more aware, more sensitive, more alert to our environment and the people within it, beings within it. And as a consequence, we become a more effective but also a more responsible person. We can begin to act skillfully throughout our daily actions. So there's an incredible value that can arise out of beginning to work with the mind. So one of the powers of this meditation is that the qualities of awareness that we develop through single-pointed concentration give us a new sense of a threshold of calmness that we can achieve simply by sitting and meditating, so that when we become agitated, as we'll invariably do, it seems more vivid than before. It's more apparent that we're upset. It's more palpable that we're anxious or restless or depressed or angry or overwhelmed with desire or jealousy, whatever it is. Just as we did with the meditation object, where we picked up the distractions more and more early, before they even had a chance to fully get up and running, we'll discover that even in the course of the busyness of an everyday existence, simply by recollecting the peacefulness that we've achieved in meditation, suddenly we're able to sort of overview the world from a position of kind of calm, objective, skillful awareness that's no longer twisted up in a kind of tight and in many ways brittle formation that's based on a whole lot of presumptions and beliefs that don't bear investigation in terms of reality. In other words, we begin to accept the reality of what is here, what we are, what we can do through the force of meditating. So it has a very direct and a very important real outcome. So Buddhist meditation, I think, might surprise some people in this aspect, because we're not trying to somehow transcendentally flip over our problems. We're trying to, in fact, work out ways of navigating through them. And sometimes I think of an analogy of the wind in a tree. I thought of this in relation to anger, that when we're very, very angry, we solidify in that anger. We become a kind of block of anger. Even if someone says something very kind to us at that moment, like, it's okay, it doesn't matter, that in itself can become a catalyst for that block of anger to flare out another angry impulse. It's an excuse to utilise ourselves yet again as a war machine or a weapon, even though that person had the very best intention in the world. So this kind of fixity is based on all sorts of presumptions about who we are and what our mind is. And Buddhism is going to propose that that angry mind, even though it appears to be everything at that moment of its full manifestation, is simply what we refer to as an adventitious defilement. It's adventitious because it can't remain. Because it's the product of causes and conditions, it will arise if those causes and conditions are present, but when those causes and conditions are exhausted, that mind of anger will subside. And so we know that, don't we? Yesterday we were incredibly angry just before lunch, and we've probably been going for 4 or 5 hours today without even remembering that we're angry yesterday. Where's that anger gone? It was a storm that has dissipated. So this is really, really interesting to begin to investigate, because Buddhism is going to say that that mind of anger, even though it is incredibly powerful and potentially incredibly destructive, both to ourselves and others, isn't anchored or fixed or rooted in the very core nature of our mind. So there's an enormous potential here for growth and development. We can begin to escape the tyranny of these problematic minds by beginning to work with the causal framework of their arising. We begin to investigate what it is that causes anger and what we can do to begin to intercede and skillfully work with it. So I've just used anger as a single example. There are many, many minds that we can substitute in its place. So this is all a background to why we might wish to meditate, and I'm going to now encourage us to do exactly that. So we're going to check our postures, and it's not crucial that we're somehow in the perfect posture, but there are a few basic pointers, such as the back being in a vertical position. So just draw the mind inwards to the body. Reel the mind in. Not just into this room, but into this body, into this moment, right now, right here. Just becoming aware of ourselves sitting on our spot. So now we just check our posture very quietly, imagining the vertebrae are stacked one upon the next, as might a single pile of coins, one up atop the next, so it doesn't topple, so the spine doesn't lean forward or back or left or right. So just find this point of fulcrum or balance. And when we have found it, just very, very gently hold it. When we get to the neck, ever so slightly tuck the chin towards the chest, just enough to take off any stress from the top of the spine. We relax the jaw. Place the tongue on the upper palate, behind the front teeth. We can have the eyes partially open or shut, depending on our wish. But if partially open, we peer down the sides of the nose to a point about 1 metre away, which we hold in soft focus, just allowing light to enter. This is a very effective technique if we're meditating when sleepy or tired. It's beneficial to have the arms in a symmetrical posture. And we can rest one hand in the palm of the other, with the tips of the thumbs forming a triangle pointing upwards, so that the tip is at about the point of the navel. For a few moments we're going to perform a visualization to bring about an initial calmness to the body. We do this in conjunction with the breath and a visualization. So as we inhale gently, feel that radiant white light, which is the essence of enlightened energy, pours into the body. Then, with the immediate out-breath, all of our physical problems, aches, pains, stresses, whatever, leave with the out-breath in the form of smoke, which tumbles away into the distance, dissolving, never to return. So we don't do this in a forced manner, just in a very quiet manner. Radiant, relaxing energy in the form of light, and all of our physical heaviness, tiredness and so forth leaving in the form of smoke. So if we've been pushing the body too hard, let this exhausted body leave with the out-breath and replace it with its opposite, a relaxed, revitalized body with the in-breath. So just work with our own situation. Feeling that even the most subtle problems in the body leave with the out-breath. With the in-breath, even the most subtle levels of the body are relaxed, energized. Now in exactly the same manner, shift our attention to our mind and its contents, just as it is. So now feel that any mental problems, anxieties, stresses and so forth that we might have, obsessions and so forth, leave with the out-breath in the form of smoke, to be replaced by a calm, open, spacious mind in the form of radiant light with the in-breath. So again, if we've really been struggling with mental issues, problems, let them go with the out-breath and replace with a fresh, spacious mind with the in-breath. So again, work with our own particular conditions. And now, without distinguishing between the body or the mind, just let go of any remaining problems or difficulties, including illnesses, the out-breath, Inhale the opposite. No problems, no difficulties. Now we establish our motivation for the meditation. This is really the bedrock upon which our meditation sits, and it's the most magnanimous, expansive, positive energy that we can possibly muster in relation to caring not just for ourselves, but for each and every sentient being, wherever they might be, in this and countless universes in all times. So we can do this in the form of the four immeasurables, thinking how wonderful it would be if all beings without exception had happiness in its causes. May they have happiness and its causes. May I, the meditator, be able to bring this about. Please, precious Buddha, inspire me thus. Of course, we can adapt this meditation to any other tradition that we might be practicing. It's really a universal meditation in the deepest sense. May all beings without exception be free of suffering and its causes. May I, the meditator, be able to bring this about. How wonderful this would be. Please, precious Buddha, inspire me thus. May all beings without exception achieve higher rebirths in the supreme bliss of liberation. Or, if we wish, we can think of this in terms of both temporal and ultimate happiness, the most extraordinary possible happiness. How wonderful this would be. May I, the meditator, be able to bring this about. Please, precious Buddha, inspire me thus. How wonderful it would be if all beings without exception abided in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred, free from holding some close and others distant. How wonderful this would be. May I, the meditator, be able to bring this about. Please, precious Buddha, inspire me thus. So with this all-embracing, compassionate attitude in place, we now place the mind upon our chosen meditation object, the breath, as I described earlier, merely observing the breath coming in and going out, being aware of the beginning, middle and end of an in-breath, the beginning, middle and end of an out-breath, the beginning, middle and end of the space between. In other words, we don't leave a single portion of the breath beyond our awareness, because the moment we do, we are distracted and we can lose the object of our focus. So by resting upon the breath in the same way that a leaf might ride the wind, we'll have the ability to remain in contact with our chosen meditation object. So just become aware of the breath, resting the mind upon it and riding the breath. Checking, is the mind upon the breath? If not, replace and resume the meditation. If there's a subconscious or a kind of subterranean chatter going on, this is a distraction. Pick up this portion of the distracted mind and return it to the main mind, focusing upon the breath. Checking. See if we can now be aware of the breath more vividly. And now to explore just a little how we can apply mindfulness to other objects. Let go of the breath as our main object and simply substitute awareness of the body or body awareness. And remain with this from moment to moment, not allowing distractions to draw us away. If we suddenly feel a little bit restless or agitated, being aware of the body, this is actually very interesting. It's indicating that we are feeling anxious in our body. There is an anxious energy in our body. All we're doing at the moment is becoming aware that it's there. It may have been with us throughout the day, but we're being distracted or even avoiding it. So in this meditation we're simply allowing the presence of the awareness of the body to appear to the lucid space of the mind, just like an object appearing to a mirror. We don't select or reject, we simply allow whatever body awareness is arising to appear upon the mirror of the mind. Letting go of the body as our main object, shifting to feelings. shifting to thoughts. So we watch thoughts with mindfulness in the same way that we might watch birds in the sky. In other words, just allow thoughts to arise within the space of awareness as they do. They might have continuation and they might dissolve. Just be aware of this in the same manner that we are aware of the breath. Now shift the focus so that we simply become aware of whatever appears to awareness. Don't try to intercede or control or manipulate or adjust. Just be sheer aware. Now return to thought. To feeling. To the body. To the breath. And resume the meditation on the breath. And now to conclude the meditation, give away all the benefits of the meditation towards those aspirations we set at the beginning in the form of the 4 immeasurable thoughts. So just as I've worked for a few moments with this one entity, i.e. me, I've done that with great care, perhaps even some form of devotion, given my estimation of my importance as a person. Consider that each and every other being out there is equally seeking happiness and freedom from suffering in each and every moment, just as we are. So how wonderful it is to give away the energy of our meditation towards this vast number. And with that we conclude the meditation. If we like, we can wriggle, stretch, whatever it is we need. So we went on a little bit of a journey in that one, but interestingly, the journey I think you'll all have found is very, very intimate, very direct. It's not intimate in the sense that we become very sort of personalised. In fact, we become aware of ourselves perhaps in a very fresh manner. Fresh because it's not being filtered or strained, often painfully, through the filter of our overly energetic controlling mechanisms. Because a lot of those controlling mechanisms are based on very unstable foundations. And probably a really obvious one is fear. We're afraid, in other words, of losing control. So suddenly in meditation, we're not clinging and milking, if you like, all of our control networks. We're letting them, putting them aside, and we're suddenly just simply here. And that can be quite challenging. Some people find that it's as though they are more aware of being uncomfortable in themselves when they begin to meditate. Did anyone have that experience? And you might be thinking, and also that means, of course, that this Ross guy out the front is talking a load of rubbish because meditation's having the opposite effect on me. So how come he's talking like that about it? One of my teachers responded to this question in a very, very invigorating manner. Geshe Dawa, one of my first teachers in 1983, answered this question. He said that when we begin to enhance the quality of our mindfulness by dwelling or riding our chosen object, remaining in contact with it, we have an experience, he said, which he described as loftiness of vision. And he elaborated to say that it is like an eagle flying high over a landscape. And that eagle has a uniquely expansive viewpoint. It can see an incredible amount of things at once. And not only that, but with remarkable precision. And so it's this experience that is making it appear as though we were suddenly inundated in an awful mental muddle instead of feeling peaceful and relaxed in our meditation. In other words, what we're doing is, at least for a few moments of the meditation, flying above ourselves, looking in and seeing all the junk and stuff that is going on anyhow. We're not making all those things happen. We're simply becoming aware of them. And so, in a sense, we're dancing desperately on the surface of that awareness all the time, hoping that the tissue that's separating us from all of those abysmal downfalls that we might fall into, all those terrible states that we're dreading, will give way if we stop dancing. Meditation saying, stop dancing and see what happens. And the remarkable thing is that we don't tumble down into some terrible state of loss of control at all. And so one of the great powers or advantages of going through the other levels of meditation that we touched upon tonight, which was awareness of the body, feeling, thought and phenomena, was that we realise through this technique that we can do exactly the same thing in relation to those 4 spheres. I use the word spheres in a kind of poetic way to describe the fact that they're a realm of awareness. So in other words, emotion. I don't know how many people put up their hand if I ask if they're battling with emotional states that aren't very comfortable. Very integrated crowd we've got here tonight, which is wonderful. Emotions are disruptive, often disturbing, chaotic, painful, searingly painful. Think of an emotion, for example, like grief, which can pierce to the very depths of our awareness, seemingly uncontrollably. I'm just trying to give a dramatic example. Sadness, which is a kind of neutered or muted form of grief. It's a kind of what Freud called, rather charmingly, melancholia. Freud said that chronic sadness has to be given a special name because it's actually a psychological condition which is very, very difficult to handle, and he called it melancholia. It was an addiction to sadness, he said. Fascinating. Freud's got bad press in contemporary cultural theory, but I think it's really needs to be looked at again. Freud wrote, I'm just touching upon this, it's a very interesting topic, a very beautiful essay, short essay called On Melancholia. Has anyone read it? It's an incredible example of the power of an essay. And what he suggests in that essay is that when we lose someone whom we dearly love, that object, and he's talking quite down in a down-to-earth way, that tangible love object, i.e. the person who has gone, died in this case, is simply not there. Their body, for example, has been cremated or buried or whatever. Of course, we have memories and a whole lot of other stuff there, but that's all, in a sense, residue. I'm not using residue in a dismissive way. We don't know quite what to do with all of our feelings because we don't have the goal, the object, out there anymore upon which to transpose all of that emotional activity and projection, that life, in other words. And so Freud says in a fascinating way that what we do in that situation is we swing back and internalise an image of that person we've lost, which we then carry in our heart, inside, and then we direct all of the conversation and the emotion to that. And he called that image an imago. Imago. It's a kind of a psychic, constellated, spectral double of the dead person in reality, the molecularly real bodily person who has gone. And that is part of the grieving process, he argued, in a healthy way, to revisit that image and to relive or re-experience a certain degree of feeling in a manner that enables us to process it in a healthy, adaptive manner. So far, so good. However, for some people, for whatever reasons, and this is where we get into deep psychological kind of investigation, some people find that they embody or invest more and more and more in that imago, in that spectral image being harboured in the heart of their concern, so much so that they effectively have a love affair intensely with that internalised object, and that has a disastrous impact because it prevents that person's ability to invest in the outside world. And that includes the world of people. And so Freud used a word here which has been incredibly misunderstood in popular takes on psychoanalysis. He used the word libido. He said that that person's primary libidinal investment has been withdrawn from the outside object and has been married to the internalised object. And what happens experientially to that person is that it appears as though the world has been drained. It has been enervated. The life of things has been sucked out. Things appear flat and dreadful. So the only way of dealing with what he called that melancholia, not sadness. So just to give you an example of how evocative that is. So Buddhism is going to propose that we work in similar ways, in a way, to a therapeutic model, psychoanalytic model here, in as much as we invest a huge amount of our engagement in a kind of image of ourself, which we protect and defend, even at the expense of alienating or injuring others. And so there are different ways of working with that problem, but meditation is going to give us a very unique way of working with it, which is simply to become aware. It sounds remarkably simple, doesn't it? You don't do the binary struggle. This is me, I'm having trouble, I want me to be fixed, I'm doing this, but me's not responding. This me, oh, I'm feeling terrible. I could even be suicidal. I feel so terrible. I'm going to bash, I'm going to smash, I'm going to grab, I'm going to hold, I'm going to do all of this whole range of spectacular things in a desperate bid to hold it together. How am I going? Not so well. Better yesterday. Etc., etc. It's incredibly compelling and deeply, deeply habituated, because it dominates our ability to be aware of the sphere of things. And so, for example, that last mindfulness, which is awareness of phenomena, is in a way dropping our habitual self, like letting go of a stone into a bottomless ocean where it just simply dissolves. Just let go of the struggle that is making everything really, really tight and difficult. Simply let go. So this letting go isn't a passive, inert cop-out. Every sitcom, I'm not a mad sitcom fan, but over the years one is exposed to them. And inevitably, especially Australian sitcoms will have one of their wild, wacky, tree-clinging eccentrics. You know how they have a character who's always eccentric? And at some point, it's normally a she, sort of in late middle age, who's a bit zany, but doesn't matter because she's past marriage material. And she's not really heavily committed to being a grandmother yet. She's got a little bit of freedom. And so what does she do? She learns to meditate. And so there in the middle of a drama, she'll be sitting there and she'll go Om. And she'll have a candle and probably a little Buddha head or something as a signifier of her spiritual endeavours. This is really a kind of caricature of meditation. It has nothing to do with meditation whatsoever. So meditation is real. It's about facing, I don't mean facing in sort of a heroic sense, it's about being aware of reality. So I had a little quote here which I wanted to share. Since my chemotherapy, my iPad no longer recognises my thumbprint. I have to write to Apple and see what they can do about that. The great Gelugpa master Jankya Rolpa Dorje said, quote, "Our great intellects these days leave things appearing clearly on one side and look for hares with horns, like rabbits with horns, as something to refute. Old grandmother will run away from them." So this is a very, very interesting little quote. But in essence, it's saying that we're looking for the solutions to our problems somewhere over there in a corner that we've identified as the place where our problems is. And meanwhile, the problems are here. Right here. Now. Not somewhere out there at all. And so the old grandmother who will run away runs away from them because she's wisdom, realising the actual nature of reality. And she runs away from those people because they're looking in the wrong place. They're looking outside for the solution, which is already with us here. And so another quote, which I think you can sort of see builds on this idea, which is a quote from a Buddhist sutra, which is, "You are yourselves your own protector. Who else is there to be your guardian?" We are our own protector and our own guardian. And this isn't meant in a kind of, again, heroic way. We're not dealing with some sort of chauvinistic idea of greatness or power or might. We're saying that the techniques and the tools that enable us to begin to transform ourselves creatively, using the materials and the resources that we already have here, that we've actually carried into this room and sat on our cushions, is exactly our best friend and guardian. Because it's through developing that one that we can transform completely the world. Not in the world, again, in like Trump's trying to do, in his own grotesque mirror image, but we're trying to actually become responsible, profoundly responsible, as citizens of the universe, where we have relationships with all of these different beings. So meditation becomes a kind of doorway to begin to work with ourselves. So that's the proposition. So are there any questions or thoughts that have arisen? Yep.
I was wondering, Ross, what are some antidotes to laziness, which is the means, or the opposite, being excitement, not feeling like meditating? Better than last time.
You're talking about inside the frame of the meditation. Yeah. So, I mean, not everyone might have heard, but how do you deal with laziness or sleepiness, and how do you deal with excitement? And that's a great question, and also it's a very coherent question, because they are the two polar extremes that we're juggling in this meditation. And make that a little bit more clear, if you like, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago sinking. Do you remember that? Sinking. If we don't remain with sufficient clarity of awareness, we sink into a state of heaviness or torpor. So what we have to do from time to time, this is answering the question, is with discriminating alertness, which is that vigilant aspect of the mind that's peeping in upon the body of the meditation to check the status of our mindfulness, if it detects that we're feeling sluggish or heavy or sleepy, or that we're only holding our object very loosely so that it drops out of our hand, if you like, we need to tighten it. So you know how when we're kind of bored and suddenly we hear a piece of music that we love, in that instant the mind becomes really, really clear and aware. We hold the object really firmly because we have a connection with it. We actually care. So we've picked the mind up and it's become more clear and more intense. So we have to do exactly the same thing with the breath. We have to hold the breath more intensely, more clearly, using some force, some deliberately mustered, determined energy. However, we'll also have times in the meditation, even the same meditation, where we have minds that are flipping over themselves, tumbling over themselves like stones rolling downhill. Thought after thought after thought, distraction after distraction in this endless kaleidoscope of imagery. That is called excitement. It's a much more subtle concept than I'm excited. It's excitement because it is in the mind running after objects of desire. Very interesting. Objects of desire. Objects that appear more attractive than the meditation object. They're desire objects. We're not talking about desire here in a sort of moralistic sense. We're talking about them apparently having sufficient force to magnetically draw our mind away. So as soon as we recognise that distraction occurring towards that desire object, we cut it with no further ado with discriminating alertness and replace and continue the meditation. So it's the deftness, the precision, the abrupt, calculated skill with we bring to bear to cut the distraction that is effective. And when I say without further ado, it's very important because we're not beginning to have a conversation on top of the remedy which we've applied to excitement, because that would merely become another layer of distraction. The mind is very, very subtle in its habitual tricks. It will come up with any numbers of ways of distracting us. Who had a preoccupation with their body? Like an absolutely amazingly interesting kneecap or whatever. It's very, very common. So this is also a form of excitement. So that object is being allowed to dominate your awareness and is making you forget your meditation object. So it's simply another example of a distraction. It just happens to be your body. So that's one of the great powers, if you like, of meditating simply on the awareness of the body, because we're learning to relate to our body just simply as a sphere of experience without taking sides. And so that will make us much more relaxed, so that when we then do the breathing meditation, we'll find that the body won't prove as distractive, because there's nothing really here that's stable sensationally. We might have a sensational body, but it's not stably sensational. There is merely one sensation flowing after another. Sometimes it will be the knee, sometimes it will be the elbow, sometimes it will seem to be the whole body. Some of us, it will be pain, because we might be actually dealing with a medical condition. There are ways of working with all of these situations. But in the terms of this particular meditation on the breath, we simply acknowledge the pain and return to the breath. There'll still be, for some of us, a background of pain because we are in fact dealing with a real pain. We're not trying to deny that. But we just allow it to be there and our focus is on the breath. Yep.
Have you used your knowledge and experience of meditation to deal with melancholia, which I assume you may have had and been very unwell? Did it help you through this period of time?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? I don't know if I'm melancholic, but I have had patches of depression, and I think it's very similar. And so we have to be very, very careful when we answer these sorts of questions, because people are coming from all different sorts of backgrounds and situations, so I don't really want to give a universal answer. But in terms of my own experience, because I was undergoing an incredibly painful hospital ordeal, I constantly used my meditation practice to get through it. And for me, it was, it sounds a bit sort of chivalrous to say this, but it was a retreat. Because suddenly I was in a bone marrow isolation ward on the 7th floor of the Royal Melbourne Hospital, and my only view of the outside world was through a little window above the exercise machine, which showed me a corner of Melbourne University. And the rest of the time I was in my room, mostly too weak to even sit up. But I still had the capacity to meditate, which I did. And so I found it incredibly beneficial, but I realised that what I could do in that time was only because of what I had done before. And so there's a Tibetan proverb that when things are going well, who is a meditator? And when things are going badly, who isn't? It's too late when things are going badly to start to try to meditate, because, as we know, it's challenging to meditate anyhow. But if you try to do it in the most extreme circumstances without having done any practice, it's more than likely that you won't even get an iota or an inkling of what potential meditation has to benefit you in those times. So I think the other thing I was maybe able to work with, because of my meditation, was that my relationships to the outside world I could let go, because I didn't know that I was going to come out of that room head first or feet first, because it was such a perilous procedure. And people on either side of my room didn't make it. So I didn't know that I wasn't going to be the next one who didn't make it. And so I was living with that reality. But then I've been living with that reality all my life, as we all are, because there's an incredibly powerful Buddhist meditation on death and impermanence, which we're encouraged to do, not because we're morbid or melancholic, but because it's really, really sensible to do this meditation, which is that I am not only impermanent, but I am going to die. I am definitely going to die. There isn't one person who has ever lived who hasn't died? Why would I be the first one to escape that destiny? No, it's true. This is how the ego thinks. I'm immortal. You know, of course, if you ask me sensibly, I'll say, no, I'm not immortal. But at some level of our conceit, we believe that we're immortal. So that to do a meditation on death and impermanence wakes us up to the vitality or the necessity of being aware. And so a death and impermanent meditation enhances our relationships of love and concern for others. One of the things you hear from people who are terminally ill is, I now realise how precious the people are around me, especially the ones who I love and who are caring for me. I've never ever thanked them before for bringing a cake or whatever it is that they've done. I've just taken it for granted. Suddenly I realise that none of that can be taken for granted. And so every moment of our existence is as precious as that awareness of that person who does not know that they're going to be alive tomorrow because of that terminal illness. And so there's incredibly profound sanity in that moment. And so Buddhism is also going to couch that in another way, which is that I call it once lifeism. Western materialist scientific culture claims not to be metaphysically invested, but it actually is committed to an ideology, if you like, which I call once lifeism. It believes that we live one time. You often see this in the paper in obituaries. You know, they did a fantastic job. They took advantage of having this life and so forth. Buddhism says that we have to live in a way that takes advantage of or enhances future lives as well. We look in another perspective outside of just the confines of this one lifetime. And so we may or may not wish to go there, but it's a really interesting idea to begin to think that our actions might in fact cascade or extend beyond the boundaries of this lifetime. So Buddhism is going to say that if you want to know what you're going to be in the future, look at what you are now, and if you want to know why you are the way you are now, look towards your own past person. Really interesting, isn't it? We're in the process of making ourselves in each and every moment. So we better finish tonight, so thanks very much for your attention. And that meditation I did, which was extended, we can do in a much, much shorter space of time. In fact, we can even just step through those four mindfulness and then reverse through them and come back to our meditation object. And we can even do that several times in the framework of the breathing meditation, whatever we like. Or we can simply focus on the breath and not do those other mindfulnesses at all. But it is very, very useful to explore the possibility of at least sometimes doing them. So if you're really, really agitated and restless and you've exhausted all of your strategies and you're getting desperate, sit and do that meditation. It's very, 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 very powerful in those circumstances. So let's give away any energy from the session. And this is called a dedication in Buddhism. It's a way of releasing rather than holding on to any benefit for our own personal gain. We give it away towards the aspirations we set. May the precious awakening mind, not yet born, arise and grow. And may that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. So thank you.